कहते हैं ना कि एक सुबह मैं उस चिड़िया के बोलते हैं ना पिंजरे का एक वो इंसान हूँ। मैं आज थाईलैंड में हूँ, कल कहाँ रहूँगा मुझे नहीं पता। और ये सुबह जो मैं आपको दिखा रहा हूँ ये एक मैंने कभी ऐसी ज़िंदगी नहीं सोची थी जो मुझे मिलेगा। थाईलैंड के 10 बज रहे हैं और मैं आपको दिखा रहा हूँ वो सुनहरी लाइफ जो हर व्यक्ति हर इंसान का एक सपना होता है कि आप अपने बेडरूम से एक ऐसी विजनरी सीन को देखो और आप अपने आप को सपनों को एक है ना मॉर्निंग में एक कॉफ़ी के साथ में, और यहाँ पे टेबल लगा है और लैपटॉप लगा है और मैं लैपटॉप खोल के और सुबह का इनकम देख रहा हूँ। नींद से उठते ही मैं चेक कर रहा हूँ मेरा इनकम, और आप भी देख सकते हैं मेरा इनकम क्या है यहाँ पे। मैं उन दुनिया की परवाह नहीं करता, मैं अपनी ज़िंदगी इस दुनिया में जीने आया हूँ और आप भी जीने आए यहाँ पे। किसी का कोई हक नहीं है कि मेरी ज़िंदगी के हिस्से का सुख जो है ना वो छीन ले। मैं कतई बर्दाश्त नहीं करूँगा। मैं मेहनत कर रहा हूँ और उसका फल मुझे मिल रहा है। आइए लॉगिन करते हैं। इस वक्त मैं कर रहा हूँ विन विन पे, जो कि आपको भी मेरे टीम को भी पता है कि विन विन पे एक बहुत बेहतरीन प्रोजेक्ट है जो आपकी ज़िंदगी बदलने के लिए तैयार है। देखिएगा, सुबह सुबह उठते ही थाईलैंड में $513 का प्रॉफिट, और ये रहा विन विन पे का मलेशिया का रिवॉर्ड सर्टिफिकेट। मैं इसको बहुत दिल से लगा के रखता हूँ। कई सारे होटल में मैं लेके गया। अच्छा, ये टास्क ज़रूर कीजिएगा डेली। अगर विन विन में पे में काम कर रहे हैं तो टास्क करना ज़रूरी है, रेटिंग करना ज़रूरी है। और बस बहुत आसान सा काम को दुनिया ने बहुत मुश्किल भरा बना दिया है। मैं आपको बताऊं कि आप लोग फ्री में रजिस्ट्रेशन करके एक हफ़्ता ये गेम खेल के एक बेहतरीन स्टार्टअप अर्निंग कर सकते हैं। आपको अंदाज़ा लगेगा। खैर, ये गेम तो आपकी ज़िंदगी नहीं बदलेगा, लेकिन ये आपको एक इशारा दे रहा है कि आपकी ज़िंदगी बदल सकती है कुछ इस तरह से। विन विन पे एक बहुत बेहतरीन प्रोजेक्ट आज के 2025 का प्रोजेक्ट है जो हमें बहुत नसीब से मिला है, और हमारी टीम बहुत बेहतरीन रोल यहाँ पे प्ले कर रही है और बेहतरीन इनकम कर रहा है यहाँ पे। तो ये गेम खेल के आप एक हफ़्ता कमा सकते हैं। और यस, यहाँ पे मैं $300 WWP, और मैं सुबह का इनकम चेक करके किसको मोटिवेशन नहीं मिलेगा। अगर आपके उठते ही आपके वॉलेट में अगर पैसा हो, उसके बाद दिन ऐसा गुजरता है कि पूछो मत, जो मैं महसूस कर रहा हूँ। और अभी मैं जिम जाने की तैयारी कर रहा हूँ। कॉफ़ी पी के मैं जिम जाऊँगा। और मैं आपके सामने क्या बताऊँ कि ये लाइफ जो है मुझे शायद भगवान ने, अल्लाह ने, खुदा ने लिख के दिया है कि अगर आप पढ़े लिखे नहीं हो, मैं 7 क्लास पढ़ा हूँ लेकिन पढ़े लिखे नहीं हूँ, तो भी मैं इतना पैसा बना सकता हूँ। तो ये लैंडिंग पेज जो है ये मेरी ज़िंदगी बदल रहा है, क्योंकि एक वीडियो रात दिन मेरे क्लाइंट के साथ बात कर रहा है, और पहला है, दूसरा लैंडिंग पेज है, तीसरा है लैंडिंग पेज। ये तीनों वीडियो मेरी ज़िंदगी बदलने के लिए रात दिन काम कर रही है सोशल मीडिया में। एग्जैक्टली वही चीज़ मैं आपको देने के लिए तैयार हूँ, सिखाने के लिए तैयार हूँ। लेकिन आप लोगों ने इस नेटवर्क मार्केटिंग को या MLM को पता नहीं क्या लूट सोच के रखा है कि यहाँ पे आओ और बस लूट के चले जाओ। आपको खर्च नहीं करना। आप जितना भी कमा रहे हो उसको आपको खर्च करना नहीं है। बिल्कुल ऐसा नहीं है। आपको समाज में अगर आपको रहना है और पूरे संसार के नियमों के साथ चलना है, तो आप जितना कमा रहे हो आपको उसमें से 10% आपको खर्च करना बहुत ज़रूरी है। ये 3 लैंडिंग पेज, अलग अलग लैंडिंग पेज जो है मेरी ज़िंदगी बदल रही है। मैं चाहे बीमार हूँ, मैं चाहे सो रहा हूँ, मैं चाहे जाग रहा हूँ, ये तीनों लैंडिंग पेज मेरे लिए बहुत बेहतरीन काम कर रहा है। उसी में से एक आपके लिए लेके आया हूँ, जो विन विन पे alpha.team, ये जो डोमेन है ये आप सभी लोगों के लिए है। आप बिलीव करो, आपका काम बहुत आसान हो जाएगा विन विन पे में काम करने के लिए। अगर आपको लगता है कि हाँ मैं सच बोल रहा हूँ, और ये ऐसी ज़िंदगी जी जा सकती है जहाँ इतनी दुनिया में इतना बड़ा रिसेशन चल रहा है। अमेरिका से कई लाखों लोगों को निकालने जाने की बात हो रही है। आप एक बार यूट्यूब उठा के आज का दिन का देख लो कि दुनिया में क्या चल रहा है।
The S&P 500 had its biggest one-day drop.
The chance of recession is higher than most people believe.
Many experts believe the US could enter a recession this year.
$4 trillion is like wiping out the entire GDP of India in just 20 days. And this bloodbath did not leave any giant behind. Apple lost $174 billion in a single day, Tesla lost $127 billion, Nvidia lost $140 billion, and the US stock market is bleeding.
Apple shares posting their worst month in more than 2 years.
America's biggest technology companies lost some $750 billion in all.
Even Tesla, it turns out, doesn't like tariffs. That company, owned by President Trump's right-hand man, Elon Musk, has sent a letter to the administration warning that it could be affected by retaliatory tariffs from the escalating trade war.
This isn't just a market crash. This is the beginning of something very, very scary because it is not just the stock market. Look at this. The interest rates in the US are at a 20-year high. Housing is becoming absolutely unaffordable for Americans. Credit card default just hit a 14-year high. And now Trump has declared a trade war against China.
We've been ripped off by every country in the world, friend and foe. We've been ripped off on trade.
Trump administration's tariff on Chinese goods is officially in effect and have a trickle-down effect that could hurt American businesses and American consumers.
New invisible wall of tariffs being built by Donald Trump could act as a barrier for millions of American families.
And if you think it's only Americans, remember, when the United States sneezes, the entire world catches a cold. And in India, we are already seeing the bloodbath happen. Foreign investors are pulling money out, the markets are volatile, and the economic uncertainty is rising with each passing day. So, is the US heading for a full-blown recession? If yes, how will this shake India? And most importantly, since we are expecting a recession, how can you protect your family? Stay with me till the end because what's coming next could change everything you know about the economics of the 21st century.
President Donald Trump's tariffs have spooked investors, wiping out $4 trillion in market value. Amid the fears of recession and an economic downturn, investors are pulling out of the American stock market.
Chairman of the Federal Reserve announced on Wednesday that the Fed is again raising interest rates to combat inflation.
The economy is heading toward a recession, the stock market is tanking, and people's costs keep going up.
When the inflation is high, when the interest rates are rising, when companies are struggling, stock markets start crashing. And this is when the investors get scared. So now, instead of keeping their money in the stock market, they rush to buy long-term government bonds because they are safer. But here's the twist. They don't trust the short-term future of the economy, so they avoid buying one-year bonds. Instead, they rush to buy long-term bonds like 10 years or 30 years bond. And this sudden demand for long-term bonds pushes the prices of these long-term bonds up. And when the bond prices go up, what happens? The yields go down. At the same time, because very few people are buying short-term bonds, the prices of these bonds starts falling. And when the bond prices fall, the yields go up. And this is where the yield curve inverts, because now the bond market looks like this. 1 year bond is giving out 6% yield, which is higher than before, and 10-year bond is giving out a 4% yield, which is lower than before. And here's where the yield curve inverts. Now look at this. The yield curve is almost about to invert. The 1-month bond yield is already higher than the 6-month yield, the 5-year yield, and even the 10-year yield. And the 3-month yield is higher than the 5 and 7-year yield. Usually, if the 3-month yield is higher than the 10-year yield, recession is expected to arrive. This is one of the biggest recession warnings in the financial world. Because like we saw, in the past 50 years, every time the yield curve inverted, recession followed. Now, the reason why this is surprising is because when Trump came to power, everything seemed like a fairy tale in the market. Investors were optimistic, businesses were expanding, and the Wall Street was celebrating. But then everything started to change.
Stock market closed out the week with the worst day of the year so far. The NASDAQ and S&P also were off. These losses are coming amid growing concerns about economic growth.
Tech-heavy NASDAQ plunged 4 5%. Elon Musk's Tesla suffered a 15% decline, and tech darling Nvidia fell 5%, and Alphabet and Meta fell more than 4% on the day.
From mid-February, the momentum suddenly reversed. And then came Monday, which was the day of bloodbath. This is when the Nasdaq plummeted by 4%, which was its steepest one-day drop since 2022. So the question is, what exactly happened and why did investors suddenly lose confidence in the market? Well, firstly, Trump's trade war is back and it's hitting very, very hard. And in response to these tariffs, China has now retaliated with tariffs on American exports. And now, this move is backfiring in multiple ways. Firstly, tariffs will make everything more expensive. If you see the US, it is a net importer, meaning it depends heavily on goods from other countries. And when it comes to China, this gap between the US and China stands at $279 billion. So US imports $279 billion more than it exports to China. And the biggest shocker is that the tariffs aren't hurting the Chinese. They are hurting the American consumers themselves.
Trump administration's tariff on Chinese goods is officially in effect and have a trickle-down effect that could hurt American businesses and American consumers.
New invisible wall of tariffs being built by Donald Trump could act as a barrier for millions of American families.
Tariffs in general raise the price of everyday goods because companies pass the higher importing cost onto consumers.
It's the American importers who will pay the tariffs for the goods at the port of entry, and they will pass on the cost to American retailers, who in turn will have to raise prices for American consumers.
Look at this. Before Trump's tariffs, an American bought a Chinese-made smartphone for $1,000. And here comes Trump, who decides to punish China and slaps a 10% tariff on Chinese electronics. So this sounds great, right? Because it seems like China will be paying for this. Well, except they don't. Instead, the Chinese company just increases the price of the smartphone from $1,000 to $1,100. So now the same phone is 10% costlier. So who's paying these extra $100? It's not some uncle sitting in Beijing, it is Bob from Texas and Karen from New York who are standing at the store thinking, why the hell is this phone costing $100 more? So if you think about the situation very, very closely, you will see that the burden is not being borne by the businesses but the consumers of America. This is the problem because of which consumers are paying the price, businesses are bleeding profits, and the stock market is crashing. And now, the United States is helpless because they simply cannot produce as much as they need. Because if you look at the numbers, the US lacks manufacturing capacity. If you remember from our trade war case study, a Tesla Model 3 is 65% cheaper to be made in Shanghai than in the US. Secondly, even with the additional taxes, the American products still can't beat Chinese products, and China's price advantage is so mind-blowing that in footwear and headwear goods, China was the lowest cost supplier for 59% of the products. And even in metal products, this number stood at 54%. So instead of punishing China, these tariffs are just punishing the American people. And you know what's the worst part? This is just the beginning. Because the second problem is that US companies are burning their profits. Why? Because many American businesses depend on China for raw materials, parts and manufacturing. In fact, companies like Apple, Tesla and Microsoft, they rely on China for raw materials. So if you see what's happening, higher raw material prices equal to lower profits, equal to lower stock prices, and lower stock prices equal to investor panic, which causes a massive market sell-off. This is the reason why the US markets are seeing a steep decline. So if you think about it, it's not at all surprising that Nasdaq, S&P 500 and Dow Jones, all of them have been plunging. And the worst part is that tariff wars are just getting worse. Look at this. In February 2025, Trump announced 25% tariff on all goods from Mexico and Canada and 10% on Canadian crude oil. And just a few days later, the White House postponed these tariffs after Mexico agreed to deploy 10,000 troops to control border crossing. But by late February, suddenly, Trump reversed the course again and declared tariffs as planned. So on 4th of March, the US officially implemented these tariffs.
Whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth.
Mexico and Canada and the tariffs set to go on next week, and saying tariffs are scheduled to go into effect on March 4th, and they will indeed go into effect as scheduled on China. China will likewise be charged an additional 10% tariff on that day.
So in return, what happened? Canada immediately slapped 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods, and China placed a massive tariff back on America. And the result is that there is absolute chaos and uncertainty in the market, and nobody knows whether the US economy will keep growing or it will start to collapse. And you know what, guys? Investors absolutely hate uncertainty, and when they see it, they sell their stocks, so stock market tanks. In fact, even the US dollar started to depreciate as global investors fled to safer assets like gold and Japanese yen. But this brings us to a very important question. How will this bloodbath affect India, and what must we do to protect ourselves from a recession? Well, the first thing you need to know is that the impact on India is real. Look at this. While the S&P 500 plunged 7.5% in the last 1 month, the Nifty 50 also dropped by 2.7%. But this is where the biggest risk comes in. You see, the US is a major market for Indian IT services, pharmaceuticals and textiles. And if the American economy slows down, the demand for Indian exports could drop. In fact, we are so dependent on the US that TCS, Infosys and Wipro, they get 50%. I repeat, 50% of their revenue only from US. So if US businesses start cutting spending, India's IT sector will take a hit. But the real danger is that it doesn't stop with IT. Every single US-driven export industry in India is in serious trouble because the US is India's #1 export partner. So if Americans stop spending, India feels it immediately. So if pharmaceutical exports drop, Dr. Reddy's and Sun Pharma type companies will suffer. If textile exports slow down, the factories in Surat and Ludhiana will take a hit. And if auto part exports stall, Indian auto supplies will get crushed. This is the reason why they say if the US sneezes, the entire world catches a cold. And lastly, the moment US slips into a recession, foreign investors will pull money out of emerging markets like India. In fact, during the 2008 crash, foreign portfolio investors withdrew 52,000 crores from the Indian markets, leading to a 60% market crash. So if history repeats itself, we all must expect high market volatility in the Dalal Street. So this brings us to the ultimate question. What should you do to protect yourself from a terrible recession? Well, the solution, guys, is very straightforward. Don't buy unnecessary or expensive things and get into an EMI trap. Build an emergency fund and have at least 6 to 12 months worth of expenses saved in case of a job loss or financial uncertainty. Secondly, do not make big purchases like buying a home. And most importantly, please enhance your skills, because only skills can save you during a volatile market. And if you're not sharpening your skills, whether that's mastering hard skills or getting a grip on communication, you are setting yourself up for failure. Because the truth is that if you're a terrible communicator, the odds of you getting laid off are sky high. And nobody, I repeat, nobody cares how hard you work if you cannot express your ideas, if you cannot bring value, and if you can't present strategy, you are of no use. So please learn both hard and soft skills as soon as possible. This is what we need to know about the US recession, impact on India, and what must we do to protect ourselves from having a terrible time during a recession. Or lastly, we can just hope that US doesn't enter a recession. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.
अगर ये वीडियो अच्छा लगा तो कमेंट कीजिएगा, दोस्तों के साथ शेयर कीजिएगा और उनकी भी ज़िंदगी में बदलाव लाने के लिए मौका दीजिएगा। धन्यवाद, मिलते हैं किसी और एक वीडियो में। थैंक यू सो मच।